Okay, well, welcome everybody. My name is Nancy Peltonen, and this is another edition of the Greater Palm Bay Chamber of Commerce Chamber Chat. And today we have with us our guest speaker, Peter Cranis. He is the Executive Director of the Space Coast Office of Tourism. Before we get started though, I wanted to give you just some updates on what's coming up next with the Chamber and do a few shout outs. And Peter, this will be kind of interactive, so we'll give some shout outs to people that are on there. I know they'll be asking you some questions. So we also have a PowerPoint that Peter will be sharing with us. So we'll make sure that you're following along with that. But before we get on there, I just wanted to let you know of the upcoming events that we have. So this week we have, tomorrow is the joint small business, Brevard Business Support, and that's all the chambers. So that's the 4 chambers. We've got the EDC, Career Source, I think TDC is part of that, and there's a number of other organizations. So we are coming together, we're bringing weekly webinars. Tomorrow is from 1 to 2, what small business need to know about cybersecurity. On Thursday, our chamber is having another chamber chat, and this is tips for reopening your business. Bart Getchins with Florida Power and Light will be on as our guest, along with some other members from Florida Power and Light. We're really excited because they have never done a live stream event before. I'm thinking this is Florida Power and Light. And so we are very excited that they have chosen our chamber to come on our chamber chat. And they're going to talk about things that once we kind of get back in recovery mode and we're going back to our businesses, really the things that you need to know so that it won't cost you a lot of money if you turn on every single thing all at one time. So that's going to be pretty exciting. That's Thursday. And then Friday, we're having our ambassador meeting. So that's from 1 to 2. If you've ever wondered what an ambassador does or what that group is like, just join us. That's 1 to 2. And if you go on our Facebook page or our website, Carolina has that all set up so you can join us on another Zoom. On Tuesday, we have our regular Brevard Business Professionals. We've kept all our regular events this month, so everything's going as planned. And that is with Linda Cobb. She's talking about what it's like to work for you. So if you're looking at doing your own business, really what that entails and best practices. We'll also have some guided networking. So I think you're probably wondering how we're going to be able to do that. If you haven't joined a virtual networking before, it's actually really neat, and you get assigned to tables and you'll be able to meet other people on the chats. So join us on Tuesday, and we are making you get up early, the regular time 8 to 9:30, but you don't have to drive there to our regular Riverview Senior Resort Living. So you're able to, just be in your pajamas and join us. It's sponsored by Shannon Gronage, so she's with Media Magic and the Business Acceleration Summit. So we're thrilled to have her. And then Friday will be, Thursday is another chamber chat. That's on the 30th, and it's 2 to 3, and it's tips for making videos with your phone. I think we're all trying to scrounge with Zoom technology and meetups and all this kind of thing, but Duncan from 142 Productions is going to, he's the professional. They do amazing videos, but I think that he'll be giving some very valuable information for those of you that are looking to do your virtual webinars. One thing though, this morning from the Florida Chamber of Commerce, that is a great website. I do recommend you go check it out because they're talking about every day they do an update. So the number of cases, the number of people tested. In Florida, we have over 27,000 cases. They've tested 273,000, a little over that. The percent positive is 9.9%. And it also varies by county. So you have to look to see what county has the highest percentage of positive tests. And Brevard County is doing fairly well. I think we are about 4% positive, whereas I think the number 1 is Suwannee County, which seems kind of strange, but it's a percentage of your population, and they have a number of cases, and they're a very small population. Miami-Dade, I think, is number 4 in the county or in the state. And Florida is a complicated thing, and I know Peter's going to get into this in terms of reopening, because probably more than almost any other state, because 20% of our tax receipts come from tourism, and 79% of our general revenues come from sales and use taxes. So with people not buying things and not using things and not going to tourist things, that's a huge percentage of our revenues coming into the state of Florida. And unfortunately, we also have to deal with the fact that June 1st is the start of hurricane season. It just throws another wrench into the system of how we recover. So the Brevard Business Support, like I mentioned, the 4 chambers, the EDC, Career Source, TDC, we are working together to look at what recovery will look like when we're reopening. We are I think having the business community involved and bringing together the cities and nonprofits and having a voice of the entire community looking at how we successfully and safely reopen Brevard County. So just one other thing, they were looking at the different, 3 different categories of returning to work. So the least restrictive are like healthcare, agriculture, management, government, professional services, finance, and insurance. They bring in about 35% of the Florida GDP and about almost 38% of Florida jobs. As we move to more restrictive, you have things like utilities, education, administration, wholesale, trade, manufacturing, mining, information. That only brings about 23% of our GDP and about 20% of Florida jobs. The biggest one, which is almost 40% of Florida jobs and the most restrictive, is accommodations and food, so our tourism category, recreation and sports, retail, real estate, construction, transportation. They are almost 39% of our GDP of the state of Florida and almost 40% of the jobs. So we really have to be safe and careful on how we reopen, and we will be keeping you updated as the 4 chambers work together, and we're working with the tourism office because obviously this is very, very important and very timely to have Peter here. So, and without further ado, then I will turn it over to the Executive Director, Peter Cranis, and thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nancy, and welcome everybody. You know, it wasn't that long ago that I came and visited you at one of your luncheons.
You did.
And my gosh, what a couple of months that's been. I mean, the world has really changed for all of us. I did want to say, and you know, I appreciate everything that you guys do, all the chambers really, because you're kind of the glue of all the businesses, and businesses, especially small businesses, have been hit so hard by this. But it illustrates the importance of organizations like ours, you know, the Tourist Development Office, chambers, you know, all of these community organizations are so critical because we're the ones that are pushing out information. We're trying to assist with education and all of the things that you're doing. So it's really, really important. And so I appreciate that. And I also appreciate everybody kind of tuning in. I'm going to give a presentation. I've done it a couple of times so far in the last few days. I'm going to try and share my screen here in a second. But basically, I put this together because people were asking, you know, what happened? You know, what does the present state look like, if you will? And then B, you know, what's our path? You know, what are the consumers saying? You know, how will we know when we can get back out there and start promoting and marketing again? And then what does that look like? So I'm going to try to address all of those in this, but let me just see if I can share my screen.
While you're sharing, I'm going to do a few shout outs to people that have joined us.
Sure, go ahead.
We have Adam Copenhaver and Amy Amaral. Beth Gitlin is with us. Oh, hey, Beth, I haven't seen you. Glad to see you're back from your trip to Africa. Beverly Squires-Wigan. We have Brian Blanchard and Bruce Lindsay. Chuck Minish. Cindy Hunt is with us. Cindy, our chamber Director of Membership. Deb Jansen is with us, Diane Bryson. We have Geraldine Blanchard, Gordon Solinger, Joe Rowlett, Keith G. Oh, well, we lost it. So we'll go back to that after. So shout out to those guys.
All right, trying to make sure I have, there we go. That's the right one. Okay, so the first couple of slides, there we go, get in presentation mode here. The first couple of slides are sort of the doom and gloom, if you will. This is kind of a snapshot. This is information that's provided by STR, often known as STAR. They track hotel inventory and occupancy levels. And this is basically a tracking of what was happening in terms of demand within Florida. So this is just the state of Florida, but you can assume if it's Florida, Brevard's going to follow. So what you see here is, leading up right into that first week of March. Obviously, things in the beginning of March begin to get a little shaky in that first week. Second week worse, and then from there it just dropped off the face of the earth there. So the last several weeks that we have tracking data for, we were down in the 70+ percentile from prior year in terms of demand. So most hotels that I've been talking to, they're tracking between maybe 10% if they're lucky, some of 15 depending on if they serve a lot of essential workers. So if they are hotels that maybe service the contractor industry, the defense industry, government, they might be doing a little bit better because there are still some essential workers that are traveling. But if they're, for those that are in the heavy tourism area, several hotels have closed. They've, just basically said it's cheaper to shutter our operation than try to operate on a skeleton staff, if you will. And then there are some that are open, but it's serving only essential workers right now.
And just so people know, we are able to share these slides afterwards. Peter has allowed us to be able to share them.
Yeah, and I think I emailed you earlier the whole deck in PDF form, so feel free to share that with all the people who are on and frankly all your members.
We will. Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome. And then this slide is similar to the last one, but it's instead of hotels, it's vacation rentals. So this is data that's tracked by data rental companies. And again, you can see, this is state of Florida. So you can see a little bit all over the board, but certainly as you got into March and started approaching April, you could see rental bookings just dropping dramatically. And right now we're staying in that low range. So, those are the two big data points that we have to look at what sort of has happened. Obviously, we look at tourist development tax, but I'll talk a little bit about that later, but our tax collections are about 45 days behind because you have the month that they're collected in, then people have 30 days to turn in their receipts, and then the tax collector has to compile all of that. Usually takes them about 10 days, but we don't think we're going to get March till a little bit later because the governor extended the deadline for for businesses to turn in their taxes. So I'm thinking it'll be probably mid to late May before we know what March happened. But I'll talk a little bit about some numbers that we do have. And then this next one is just, this is a look at our website with Google Analytics, and you can just see the same thing happened. And the orange is last year, and then the blue line is this year. And as we started getting into March and certainly in April, web traffic, inquiries, and people looking for vacation information just really dropped. So that's sort of the story of where we are. Now, this next slide is interesting. I actually just updated it not too long ago because Harris is doing this poll, and they're doing it on a weekly basis. And this is actually their latest wave. April 11th to 13th is when they were in the market. And this is a consumer, basically a consumer poll looking at when are people thinking about doing certain activities. And, you can see going out to dinner, a lot of people are saying either immediately or within the next 30 days, or certainly within a couple of months. The majority of them are saying that. But then if you ask them, when are you going to stay in a hotel? About 20% are saying immediately or within the next 30 days. Another 20%, 2 to 3 months, and then another 20% after that, 4 to 6 months. So, you really start seeing that stretched out, and then there's also a bigger number of people that are saying a year or more, which obviously is concerning to anybody in our business, because we hope for a quicker recovery. The one thing I will say about this data is that it does improve every week. So as people sort of hear more information about the pandemic, as they sort of see the light of day, if you will, those numbers we are seeing some improvement in that. I don't imagine we'll really get a good feel until truly we have businesses open and we have people traveling again. Then I think we'll begin to see a little bit more accurate information in terms of what people are actually doing.
With the numbers, Peter, that it shows at the bottom on Take a Cruise, because Port Canaveral is, what were we, number 1, number 2 for cruise ports?
Correct.
What about, so the ripple effect into that area? What do you are you getting into that later, or what are you thinking that that's going to have?
I think this data is similar to other data that I've seen about taking a cruise, and you'll see in a few slides, there's a couple of other consumer data points around that. But yeah, absolutely, cruising took a big hit in this whole thing. I think they're going to probably be lagging behind the rest of the tourism industry in terms of recovery. The cruise lines have a very loyal consumer database audience they can go to, but in terms of the average person who maybe has taken a cruise or two, or maybe people that have not taken a lot of cruises. And by the way, this data doesn't filter out those people, so this includes everybody. This isn't just talking to people who are used to cruising.
Got it.
People who are used to cruising are probably going to go back to cruising sooner than maybe somebody that's never cruised or only taken 1 or 2 cruises and is plugged in. But it does speak to overall a little bit slower comeback on the part of the cruise lines, and frankly, that's got a trickle down effect for all of our businesses here in Brevard, because as you said, we're the number 1 cruise port in the nation, and those people stay before and after their cruises in hotels here, and they eat at restaurants here and go shopping and do a lot of other activities. So this is, it's not necessarily great news. That's a segment of the audience that we really have to take into consideration as we're looking forward. But let me get in a couple of more slides that have similar data. It's kind of interesting to see.
Somebody had one question though.
Yeah, sure,
they asked if you have the demographics of the people surveyed in this.
I don't have it with me, but I can get them.
Okay.
Not around.
But you said Harris employees, right?
Harris is a company that does a lot of research, and they do a lot of consumer research. They tend to have what I would call panels. So these are people that have already kind of signed up to receive different surveys. But I can get, I'm sure it's a pretty broad audience. I don't think they would probably be too restrictive. I think it's probably a pretty broad audience in terms of adults and income, to reflect the society as a whole. But I can get a little bit more detail on that. And the same with this one. This is done by a company called Longwoods, and again, they do they do a lot of panel research. So while I don't have the specific breakdown of what the the makeup of the people who receive this are, I'm pretty safe in assuming that they are a very broad audience in order to reflect, the majority of what people look like. And here, you see what is of concern to people. And obviously, the virus itself is a huge concern and has a huge impact. Economic concerns, certainly those are there. You have a lot of people that work in various industries that are so negatively affected that it's hard to believe that economic concerns wouldn't be a factor here. And then, interestingly, transportation costs. I believe that when travel opens back up again and people are beginning to think about traveling for vacation or even business travel, I believe there's going to be a lot of opportunities in terms of deals and special offers. It's something that we've seen many times and during other negative economic times through history. When the industry begins to come back, they tend to go to incentives financially to try to get people to travel again. And then as travel begins to show improvement, then those rates tend to go back up. But I don't think transportation costs are going to be as big an issue as we get into recovery. And then this is another slide that's it's done by a company called Destination Analysts. Again, just probably a very broad audience that they polled. What are the first things that you would like to do when you take a trip? And beach as well as small towns tops that list, which I think plays well to our offerings, followed by cities and parks. I think people are going to be looking for more outdoor experiences. They're also going to be looking for experiences that are maybe closer to home. That's not completely reflected in here, but in other surveys and other research that we've seen, people are probably going to look for a drive trip before they look for a fly trip, at least initially. And then, we talked about cruising. You can see how far down the list they are. They're very low here. And again, that's unfortunate, and that does have an impact on us in our area.
Can I ask you about the airlines, since
Sure.
they have such a high capacity right now? You see all the planes parked at different airports, but I think 75%, like they're only about 25% capacity flying right now. Do you think that's going to affect the ticket pricing then? Because if there's not, before there was so much competition and all these different routes, and with the airlines now really cutting back, do you think it'll take a while for them to, give some good deals? Because I don't know, like there's so many different airlines. I'm thinking some of them are going to go under.
Yeah, I think it'll vary depending on the destination. So Orlando,
Sure.
I think you're going to see a lot of deals from major cities into Orlando, trying to get families to start traveling again. Again, I go back to historically, whenever we've come out of a recession or a time when travel has been impeded, usually the way the recovery looks is that hotel rates, airline rates tend to come out with a lot of offers, a lot of deals, a lot of specials. Even if the capacity has been reduced, they need to get that pipeline filled to get started. And then, then as things begin to improve and they begin to see their flights that they do have reaching capacity, and they start adding new capacity, those prices will start to creep up. But I think we'll see, at least from the vacation side, the leisure side of the business, I think we're going to see a lot of offers from airlines, from hotels, from pretty much everybody in the industry, from attractions. I think the Orlando attractions, I think you're going to see a lot of Florida resident specials and offers to try to get people back to the parks. and a lot of it's going to be interesting to see in terms of what do they do in terms of
Mhm.
handling social distancing and some of the other issues that may come up as businesses reopen. It's hard for me to believe that a Disney, for instance, is going to open up their park to full capacity right off the bat. It may be that they keep artificially the numbers low and cap out at a lower number so that people can social distance and they can create space in lines and things like that so that people are separated. So it's going to be a little interesting to see exactly what this recovery looks like. I keep saying to people, it's not going to be a light switch where one day you're just going to flip the switch and everybody's going to be open. We're all going to be able to just go wherever we want. Just like it took various steps and phases to get where we are today. I think we're going to see the reverse of that as we begin to open up, and it'll be a very cautious opening where you might see, for instance, restaurants maybe being allowed to serve outdoors, or maybe at 25% or 50% of capacity, so that there's still social distancing and distance in their establishments. And I think that's going to be across all of our businesses. So um, there's a lot to try to get our heads around and understand, but I do think it's going to take a while before we get back to where we were before this all began.
I think they said that with Paris Disney, that they're slowly opening the restaurants and some of the outdoor shopping, and it will take a while, I guess, before the park and that opens. So I think you're right, as they're slowly opening and seeing how it works, and then continuing to open more things, because yeah, flipping everything on all at once. Other countries that have gone through this is showing that that's a big problem, and they're getting a resurgence back again of COVID-19. So we want to make sure that doesn't
Yeah,
happen.
I think a mistake that we can all make, and we have to be very cautious of it, is to rush begging, because there's so much pent up demand, and
Mhm.
we're all working from our homes, and we're all sequestered, and there's just going to be so much demand to get outside and get outdoors and travel and do all the things we love to do. And yeah, we just have to watch very carefully, because we don't want to see a resurgence, and we don't want to have to go back to where we are today.
Right.
So the whole point of you know, uh, staying at home and the stay-at-home orders is to eliminate that from happening, and come out on the other side where we can begin and resume some sort of semblance of normalcy, or the new normal, as I call it. This is a little bit of a peek into the future. This is an aggregated um, piece of data that I've gotten from a number of different sources. But the sources that I've gotten them from are all online booking types of portals. And what I've gone around and I've asked them, what are you seeing for each of these months in terms of advanced bookings? So, while we were down and are down right now, probably in the 70, 80, maybe even 90% range, April right now is showing 50 to 55% down from prior year. And then a little bit of an improvement in May, 40 to 45%, and then a little bit of a bright spot in June and July, where the range runs from all the way from 15% up to 25% in July. So there's still people, these are people that have reservations, and they use some kind of online system to book. And so, we're seeing a little bit of an improvement over June and July. A lot of that's going to depend on, what happens and how quickly, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes, but how quickly can we get back to some openness in the travel area. And then August and September, again, a bit of a bright spot with some improvement in August and a flat September right now. But, I think those numbers will probably improve if we're depending on the timing of when we're able to open. And so we're just going to have to kind of see when that is. I'm gonna just throw out a few things that I've heard. Obviously, I'm plugged into the Emergency Operations Center for Brevard County, and one of my roles is to sit at the Emergency Support Function 18, which is business and industry. And so thanks to you, by the way, Nancy, and again to all the chambers. Whenever we have a need or whenever there's information that we need to get out, you help us get that out very quickly, and we appreciate that greatly. And vice versa, if you guys have a need or you know a business needs or you have information to share, then we can push it out through our desks. So, you know, listening to what is happening right now, both from the governor's office and from the policy group and the county commission, you know, they're beginning to have those discussions about returning to normal and getting back to business. Nothing has been, to my knowledge, nothing's been said with specific dates in mind. But I will throw out that right now there's a tourism and lodging order in the county that prevents tourists from staying in hotels. That goes through the end of April. I don't know if that's going to be extended beyond that time. There has not been conversation about that. And then in May, you have a couple of things happening. Of course, you have Memorial Day weekend, which is typically a huge travel weekend, kicking off the summer. And then on May 27th, which is 2 days after Memorial Day, NASA just announced human spaceflight leaving from the Space Coast for the first time in 11 years. So that's a moment in time that's going to get a lot of attention. And I think it would be wonderful if it could really happen, but if we are able to open back up to visitors and people can travel again, those moments in time could be really significant for us. If the guidance for whatever reason is to try to maintain where we are or not open up quite as much as allowing visitors from outside the county, then that's going to push off any kind of recovery more into that June-July timeframe. So that's just sort of the thought process and some discussions that have are being had. But again, I don't have any firm dates and don't really know where that's going to land. So we'll see about that. I wanted to share, this is just some pacing data, also just showing, this is also vacation rentals, and this is just showing that blue line is this year and the green line is last year. And you can see that they begin to start to merge right around mid to late July and as we go into September. So there's still a lot of reservations that are out there. People have not canceled their summer trips at this point, but of course we'll see how we do over the next 4 to 6 weeks. This is another data point. This is a company called Adara. They look at web searches for specifically for vacation. So this one is family vacations. And you can see the orange line, if you can't read the numbers at the bottom there, or the codes, the orange line is 90 plus days, and then that green line is 60 plus days, and then the other lines are lower. But you can see that there's activity there, and people are booking a month, 2 months, 3 months out. So, the further out, the more activity there is, and that's what you would expect. But it's good to see that there is activity and there are people looking for vacations at this point. So this was as soon as early as last week that these numbers were pulled. So as of last week, there's still people out there doing searches. Obviously, a lower level for the near term and a higher level for a little bit farther out. But it does show signs of life out there, which is obviously what we're looking for. I wanted to share this. This is not something I talk about in a level of detail in regular times. I usually just throw out what our total tourist development tax collections are for the year, or maybe in a given month I might talk about a particularly good month. But I thought this is relevant because this is really how I got to my forecast, was using a lot of the data that's in this presentation. And what we did, we started with, our year starts in October. So from October to January, we had collected a little over 5 million. And then in February, we had an original projection for February of 1.6 million. It ended up coming in at 1.7. So we were up 6% in February. So that was good. You know, we knew that was probably going to happen, and that was good news for us. But then, of course, as we get into March, March was going to be the largest budgeted month of the year, and in fact, probably would have been a record number if we had stayed on pace for where we had been before. My budget this year was 16.6 million. We were on pace for over 17 million if we kept going the way we were. So March was going to be a great month, and here I'm going from a little under 2.2 million down to 542,000. I actually have just gotten some new numbers. The STAR report came in, and interestingly, March was not as bad as we thought it was going to be. So occupancy was down about 35%, and revenue per available room, which is known as RevPAR, was down about the same, but average daily rate was only down about 6%. So people held the average daily rate, their rates held in March, and even though occupancy was down, it wasn't down. The number that I had was 75%. It wasn't down by that much. So I've done a new projection for March, which comes out quite a bit better than the 542,000. And so my projection right now is that it'll come in at 1.2 million, which is still significantly down from what it was budgeted, but a lot better than 542. So we'll see how close I am. I've been trying to forecast using a lot of different data points, and STAR is a big part of that. But we'll see that could be a swing of 650,000. So that's could be huge for us, because this affects all of our budgets, including marketing and cultural grants and a lot of other areas, the beaches, capital programs. So this money is going to a lot of different purposes, and these numbers hurt, quite frankly.
So you do give money for events. So did you find that because some of the events didn't happen during this high season, that's kind of saving you the money too, or are they being postponed so you still have to support them, or how is that working?
Yeah, so a couple of big events did happen early on in February and March, and then obviously after things began to change in that second week of March, and a lot of the events canceled. But we tried to pull our advertising as soon as we possibly could, as we knew the information was put out that things were not happening. And in some cases we were able to do that, other cases we weren't. But it does have a huge effect, because we also have a $500,000 cultural grant program that was going to be awarded to about 36 different groups. And now with these numbers, reforecasting, we're going to have to readdress exactly what we give and who we give it to. One of the questions that we're asking is if there was an event that was planned, for did it happen, or was there money spent towards it happening? And then is it canceled completely, or is it being rescheduled? So all of that's going into the pot to look at that. But yeah, it certainly affected us, and it's going to affect a lot of other organizations going down the line. And you see what happens in April and May. I mean, I'm projecting down 90%. I've got some hoteliers telling me that's probably better than what they're seeing. Others are agreeing with me. I think looking at some of the numbers from STAR and from key data, I think that's probably pretty accurate. But a lot of this we're going to have to wait and see. And then you just begin to see some of my anticipated improvements again, assuming we can reopen and begin to receive tourists again in June and July. We'll see some improvement, and then continued improvement into August and September. And the question really is, not when are we going to, if we're going to recover, but when is it going to happen? When are we going to get a full level of recovery? Is it going to take us, another is it going to take 6 months, 8 months, a year and a half? On average, looking at past, and nothing's really can be compared to this because of the length of time that this has gone on, but looking at other time periods where tourism has really dropped, it's taken about 18 months on average to get back. But I've always felt Central Florida, being Orlando and ourselves, I think we've always recovered a little bit quicker. I think we're a little bit more resilient, and the perception of safety and the perception of a place where we want to go with our family, we always score very high with that, particularly with the theme parks and certainly our beaches. So I'm cautiously optimistic that our recovery will be faster than maybe the U.S. as a whole. Just a quick recap, and then I'm going to show you a little bit of budget perspective. But what we've learned, I think people are going to probably be a little bit slow to get back to travel, but they are going to get back to traveling. Leisure will come back first, so business travel will probably lag a little bit behind. Most people will want to drive versus fly, and they might be looking for destinations that are closer to home. Beach and small towns top the consumer's list. Probably initially, people are going to prefer not to be in large crowds. Cruises are going to be significantly impacted, as we talked about. And we'll be out there testing the waters with consumers. We're actually running our own consumer research, and I'll talk about that in a second. But we've got some plans for what we're going to do in terms of marketing and how we're going to market ourselves coming back. And then as far as timing, it's hard to say. I mean, could be June, could be a little later than that. It really all depends. And, like I said before, what we don't want to see is we reopen and then we get in a situation where there are cases, popping up again, and then we have to kind of dial back to where we are now. So we don't want to do that start and stop thing. If we can avoid it.
Right. We had, before you get to this slide, we have 2 questions for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
One is, thanks, Luis. Do you have any data regarding personal moves to Florida for work and also company relocations to Florida? I know EDC has some of this data, but what do you know?
Yeah, no, we don't, that's not something we track. It would probably be the EDC would be the best source of that information.
Okay, and the second question was, how about data for visits to Florida for business reasons, business meetings, trade shows? Yeah, I know a lot got canceled. So
there's a couple of pieces of research that we're looking at regarding that, and Orlando's a really good measurement of that with their 3 million square foot convention center. They're saying that there's still conventions on the books this fall. Obviously, that they've been severely impacted, and I don't think they're going to get, this year is not going to recover. It'll probably be a little bit longer. But the thing is that large meetings are harder to reschedule, and they tend to, they'll tend to probably cancel and then just look ahead a year versus trying to shift those dates, because it's very difficult when you're dealing with these large groups, move in and move out times. It's really hard to reschedule things. So things that have been canceled, most likely they're not going to reschedule for this year. They're probably going to push into the next year. As far as business travel, all the numbers that we're seeing, business is going to lag leisure. So right now there's government restrictions on travel through June 30th. That might get a little bit sooner. If it does, that would be somewhat helpful. but there's, you know, all the signs that we're looking at. Business is going to probably be a little bit slower, and the reason is, I mean, think about it. You know, if businesses send their employees somewhere and somehow the employee is affected negatively, they perhaps contract the virus,
Right.
you know, then they can become liable. So, you know, employers are going to be much more hesitant to send their people out on, you know, what would be non-essential business travel very quickly. I think that's going to take a little bit longer to come back.
Okay. And one final question.
Yeah, sure.
He's got, are your projections conservative? It seems that Jacksonville beaches, they are acting like everything's fine and opening up. I mean, what are your thoughts on some of them just acting like everything is perfectly fine and opening
Yeah,
up?
I mean,
And
you know, um, I think there's two things. One is um, the guidance of leadership in our county and
Mhm.
state level. You know, they're going to be the ones to dictate when things reopen and when travel is going to be, you know, readily available. And you know, the Department of Health is an organization we have been looking to for information, as well as the CDC. So, you know, we're going to follow all of their guidance. I mean, you know, we don't control, for instance, the beach parking is all closed. You know, we don't control that. That's really, you know, the county commission and the policy group of the Emergency Operations Center that control those types of things. So we can't, you know, we can't say exactly, you know, when those restrictions are going to be lifted or not. And so, you know, we're just going to have to look for that guidance when things begin to open up. You know, we'll be there and we'll be supportive, and we'll hopefully be able to begin marketing before, you know, too deep into the summer. But again, you know, what other communities are doing, it's hard to say. I mean, everybody's approaching this a little bit differently. You know, I think it was the first sort of sign of light last week when the president and the White House task force came out with the 3-phase approach. You know, phase one, what they're saying is after a peak is hit and you begin to have a consistent level of days with lower cases of COVID-19 appearing, 14 days from that is when phase one starts. So you really don't even get to phase three for a while. So you know, I don't think we've hit peak yet in Florida. I believe they're still saying it's May 2nd, May 3rd are dates that I've heard around that time. So that first week in May. So, you know, conceivably it's possible that things could begin to open up more as we get closer to Memorial Day weekend. But I'm not going to predict because I really don't know what it'll look like. You know, I'm hopeful, but you know, I'm just like everybody else. I don't want to go through having stayed at home for a month or 6 weeks only to, you know, be released from that and then have to go back to that again, you know. So I just hope that when the time comes and we do reopen, that we don't see a resurgence and we're able to just, you know, begin to slowly get back to our lives. This is just a slide that just shows the resilience of the tourism industry. And you know, I've been in our business quite a while, over 25 years. I've been through 9/11, Gulf Wars, the Great Recession, 3 hurricanes in 1 year, big hurricanes in different years, the end of the shuttle program. And you can pretty much see, I mean, for a long time, our budget stayed in that $8 million range. And it was around 2012, 2013, when it began to start creeping up again. People began to build hotels here, more hotels here. So we saw an increase in inventory. And then there was just stellar growth for about 5 years. And right up until last year, we had hit 16 million. That was a new high water mark. And so I was projecting 16.6 million going into this year. We were pacing towards 17. Obviously, that's not going to happen now. So, you know, are we going to get back to 16 quickly? You know, probably won't be a fast return. I'm hoping it'll be more of a V shape than a slope. but you know, that's going to be something that we're going to have to work on. I know there's still a lot of hotels planning on building here. I've had a couple of hotel companies reach out to me and say, you know, we're still bullish on the Space Coast and we still want to build here. So you know, I think a lot of that building that was in the pipeline is still going to happen. It might happen a little bit later, but I still think it'll probably happen. And then just to give you a little bit of insight into what we're planning. So just like we think that the recovery is going to be a phased approach, our marketing program will be a phased approach. It'll begin with a lot of social media and our website and a lot of information that we put out through our office that'll begin promoting first with the local market. So as restaurants begin to open, we'll begin to message out to locals, hey, go out and have a meal. Encouraging people to patronize those restaurants again, because if we don't get our restaurants back, you know, that's a big amenity for people coming to visit. So we need them to get back running, and so the locals can really help in terms of being the first people to go out and have a meal again. And you saw that slide earlier where people were saying, yeah, that's something that they'd be willing to do. And then we will probably begin to promote it from a perspective of rings. So think about 50 miles outside of Brevard County, you know, down to Vero Beach, Orlando, Daytona, are really our near drive market. That's where we'll start marketing. It'll be a combination of lots of different media types, from digital to television and things like that. But we'll start in the near market, and then as things improve and we see improvements and a steady growth, then we'll start pushing out farther to the West Palms, Miamis, Tampas, Jacksonvilles. But we're going to stay pretty close to home. The only other market we're looking at is potentially down the road, and this would probably be in a later phase, Atlanta. Atlanta would be is a market that could be a strong drive market for us. It's about an 8-hour drive, so it's a little bit at the edge of that. I think it's got a great population center. We have a good history with their population coming here and visiting in the past, so they're on our list, but they probably wouldn't be first out of the box. It'll be some of the nearer drive markets. So you know, our messaging is going to be very much, you know, talking about our wide open spaces, our beaches, bring your family. There's lots of, you know, outdoor activities that you can engage in. So we're going to play to our strengths. And then, of course, we're going to promote any rocket launches and the space program. We're certainly going to promote that, as we always do. And as I said, that May 27th date, it's a big moment in time, because even if we aren't opened up on May 27th to visitors, the world is going to see that human spaceflight has come back, and we're going to have more launches down the road. So it's going to be one big advertisement for us. So, you know, whether or not we have people lining the beaches watching it or not, we'll see. But certainly it's a moment in time that'll garner us a lot of great publicity, and we're excited about that.
If they're not on the beaches, they'll be
Happy
lined
to
up in
take
their
any
cars.
questions.
So, well, I think you answered Pam from Tuckaway Shore. She was asking, have you changed your marketing plan as a result? So thank you. You did go over that.
Yes,
the final
absolutely.
one I have, what percentage of total travel leisure industry here come from locals?
Well, it depends on how you define a local. We measure, for the most part, we look at people from outside of Brevard County. You know, that's typically who we've marketed to in our history historically. But as I said, you know, if we start opening up restaurants and stores and services, and you know, they're not supported by the locals, where I consider a local somebody here from Brevard County, if they're not getting support from the locals, then it's going to be really hard to start attracting, you know, people from other areas and saying, come on back, we're ready to treat you. But a lot of our restaurants and a lot of our other amenities aren't open. That's just not going to be a positive. So we want to make sure that, you know, the locals are helping us in terms of supporting those small businesses and making sure that they get open again and they stay open. And then, you know, beyond that local market, really looking at the state of Florida, I think 4 or 5 of our top 10 source markets are Florida markets. So Miami, Orlando, Tampa, those are all top source markets for us historically. So, a big chunk of our visitation comes from Floridians. And then, as we go outside of the state, Atlanta's on that list, Charlotte, New York, Philly, DC, some of those cities are listed there, but those aren't going to be the first places that we're going to market to, and they're probably not going to be the first places that will recover. It'll be more the drive market, we believe.
Okay, well, this was a lot of information and
Yeah,
fabulous.
sorry, it's a lot to process. My brain is swimming these days. So.
Oh, I'm sure, but it was fabulous because I think because tourism is so important to our economy here locally, and I know that I think our county is one of the top 4 in the state for the mix of businesses that we have. So we are very nicely positioned, but tourism is still a large percentage of it. And so getting this update, I think it was really important. And yeah, I think it was just February or January you had been at one of our luncheons. And
Right.
so, yeah, talk about what a difference a few months make. But
Right.
we really appreciate this. And
Well, hopefully the next time I come and visit you, we will be on the other side of this, and there will be a lot more positives to talk about, and we'll be in a much better situation. That's my hope. I'm very bullish on our area. I grew up here, and I've seen amazing things happen, in spite of some real setbacks. We've always bounced back, and the tourism industry as a whole is very resilient, and that's bounced back. So I'm positive about our future. It's just maybe going to take us a little while to get back where we were, but I'm confident we'll get there. And all the other industries in this community, they all need our support. And I'm going to go out and eat at restaurants and shop and do all those things as soon as I'm able to. And I hope everybody does that.
Well, thank you, Peter. We definitely appreciate your update today. I think that was it for questions. I was trying to feed them to you as we were going along. We had a lot of participants, and I'm sure the views of this was unbelievable. We had a lot registered for this event. They really wanted to thank you for the information. There was a number of people that just said how valuable the information was. So they really appreciate, your feedback on what's going
Absolutely.
on.
Also, Nancy, I will mention we are keeping a database of people, and we're putting out a weekly newsletter that kind of recaps a lot of what's happening in the tourism industry. So for any tourism related businesses, or even if you're just ancillary business that has an interest in what's going on in the tourism world, if you maybe Nancy, if you want to collect those and send them to me, we'll add you to our database so you get our newsletter. You can see what's happening as it's happening. For instance, when the tourism lodging order came out, the county attorney's office asked us to get the word out about it because we have the best database. So when that order is rescinded, trust me, we will be the first to send it out and get that word out to everybody. But we're happy to add people to that database so they can get our information as well.
Okay, and just as a reminder to everybody, we will have the slides available, so we'll get those up this afternoon. You'll probably see them quicker on our Facebook page. I'm not sure if we'll get them on our website right away, but we'll definitely get the access to you. And thank you, Peter. This was absolutely fabulous. We'll make sure that people are still able to see it after, so I know the views will go up. The next one we have this week, though, is with Bart Getchins with Florida Power and Light. It'll be 2 to 3 on Thursday, and I think that's going to be a very interesting one as well, because once we're all kind of trying and thinking about going back to work, you definitely want to reopen the right way. So we're thrilled to have Bart and the team from Florida Power and Light on with us Thursday. So check our new calendar. Carolina did our calendar for the month. She's just the rock star. So you'll see everything that we have going on this month. it really is busy. I keep thinking, why don't I have any downtime? But all these webinars and everything we're on, it's like, geez, it's hard to shut everything off. I've got more computers and electronic equipment around me than, you know, I've ever had in my life. So it's kind of cool. But I can't thank you enough, Peter. And for everybody that was on there, if you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to us. I know Peter can send us emails, answers, and we'll get that out. If you have that question, I'm sure others do. And once again, Peter, I just really want to thank you and for all the great information. I know we'll have you back and do the woo woo when everything's back to norm. And if not, I'll be watching on May 27th, either from my balcony or from my car window. If we're not open, then that's going to be historic. And shout out to Carolina for all her help with our technology, because there's always something that goes on. So thank you, Carolina, for that. But thank you all. And we'll shut down now, and we'll make sure the slides are out there for you. So.